Hey everybody, if you have been tasked with getting your organization compliant with CMMC, I am pretty sure you might be a little bit confused about Control AC.L2-3.1.20 external connections because I myself have been tasked with getting some organizations compliant and I didn't really understand what this control was talking about. To me, it sounds, first you might read this and you might think, okay, this is basically the entire internet. There is no way we can track what websites are people supposed to. Well, you can track it, but the thing is, CMMC is all about documentation. There's no way you're going to list out every single website that people are limited to go to, right? Because most modern firewalls, most modern solutions already do this automatically and they update that list. So, for example, I know in Palo Alto, you can create a group that blocks, for example, gambling websites. They already have a prepackaged solution that says, hey, users can't access gambling websites, users can't access drug websites about drugs, and I was assuming this is what it was talking about. You want to list out every single website that users can access. But upon reading this, I was beginning to understand what this really was talking about. And as you can see from the discussion and the examples, that is not what this is talking about at all. This is actually talking about external systems. So for example, if you work with an MSP, that MSP is an external system. If you work with, obviously if your organization probably is working with the DoD. If you're working with the DoD and you get your files from DoD Safe, or you download files or you upload files to DoD Safe, that could be considered an external system. It's basically a system that you are not in charge of, and you need to be able to track these. So, like it says right here, external typically refers to the outside of the organization's direct supervision and authority. However, it gives you a very good example of that this is not always the case because it might be talking about let's say you have a really big company and you have a CUI enclave. You guys have a commercial network and then you have a CUI enclave. What a lot of companies do is they have the commercial network and then they have the CUI enclave. The enclave is in a completely separate building physically, completely separate network. Only people who need access to CUI are in there. And what this is talking about is what are your rules on how you're monitoring or preventing people who are working in the CUI systems from putting the file in the commercial network, right? Because if you're making a product and this product is being sold to normal end consumers, civilians, but then you have like a DoD side of your business where you sell that exact same product to the DoD and that contract has CUI. What you want to do is you don't want to allow those people that are working on the CUI stuff to take a flash drive, put CUI on it, and then go out, leave their CUI physical building, go to the commercial building, and then plug it into a commercial system. In that scenario, your commercial network would be considered an external system to the CUI enclave. So that is a very good example here of that really cleared up a lot of things and what this was really about. So common examples of external systems, like I said, if you work with an MSP, they're considered an external system. People's personal phones, that's an external system, right? You put in a policy, hey, you can't use your personal phone for work. You can't take pictures of the office on your personal phone. Things like that. And another thing that is actually very helpful here is that even if the organization has its own cloud, for example, Microsoft 365 GCC High, even though technically the organization owns it, that is still considered a external system. Even if your company owns the cloud tenant, for example, you have a Microsoft 365 GCC High tenant, this is also talking about that because under the eyes of CMMC, your GCC High tenant is still considered an external system, even if that's your only system, right? A lot of companies are in the cloud. They don't have on-premises servers. They don't have anything like that. However, in terms of CMMC, that is still considered an external system. So what they're really talking about here is track all your cloud services, track all the vendors that are providing services to you. Identify systems that you do not want CUI going through. So you don't want people uploading pictures of your CUI with their personal phone. You don't want CUI going to a cloud service that you might have, but it's not FedRAMP, right? You don't want to allow someone to upload CUI to Smartsheet if your Smartsheet is not FedRAMP, right? You don't want to allow, maybe you have Microsoft 365 commercial. You want to make sure people are not uploading CUI to that because it's not FedRAMP anymore. So that's really what this is talking about here. And you can do this a variety of ways in terms of how to enforce it, right? But really what they want to see is some sort of user agreement that makes people aware of what they need to be doing. And the example it gives you here, again, is your company has a project that contains CUI. You tell your coworkers that, hey, no personal laptops, no tablets, use your work computer, right? Now, obviously, there's a ton of ways to enforce this technically, right? If you got Intune and conditional access, only Intune enrolled computers can access your tenant. Super easy to enforce. However, this is one of those controls that really gets a lot of people confused, and I was one of those people. I was very confused, and now that I understand it this way, that's how I would do it. So if you want to know how to actually do this, I'm going to show you how I would do it personally. And the thing I would do is I would start a vendor, something like this, vendor, I don't know why I'm calling it risk management, vendor list, something like that. A list of your vendors. And when I say vendor, I'm not talking about Amazon, I'm not talking about eBay, I'm not talking about, hey, let's go buy markers for the office, let's go to Staples. No, I'm not talking about Staples. I'm talking about software as a service. I'm talking about external service providers like your MSP. Maybe you've got consultants with you and you're paying them monthly. I'm talking about those type of vendors. And what I would do is I would make a SharePoint list in your IT SharePoint with these columns, right? The name of the service, like iCloud. Let's say you got company phones for people. iCloud is in there. And iCloud is not FedRAMP. It's not. So do you want to allow CUI in iCloud? No, you don't at all. So really what they want to see, an assessor wants to see, is how you're tracking all of this and how are you approving stuff and who's approving it. And then you want to make sure that you're relaying this information to your end users through some sort of end user agreement and having them acknowledge that agreement. And personally, this is how I would do it. So I listed a couple things that might be common in a lot of people's environments. Microsoft 365 GCC High, obviously that is a CUI asset. That is FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. It's FedRAMP High. There is a CUI. CUI status. What I'm using that for in this example is, are we gonna allow CUI through it? Yes or no? And I said yes because it's GCC High. And the MSP that we use in this example, again, this is purely example. This is not a real environment. MSP we use, that would be an external service provider. CUI status, is CUI going through the MSP or not? It really depends. I would say no, it's not. Our MSP would not be doing that. And then the asset type here, CUI asset, a CRMA asset. I forgot to add specialized asset here as well. And you want to make sure that you're marking these correctly. And this list actually is pretty good for just compliance in general, because then you get a really good gauge of where your logical boundaries need to be. Another example is, I feel like a lot of organizations overlook this one, Adobe Creative Cloud. If you guys got an Adobe license thing going on, and you pay for the paid version of Adobe Acrobat for editing PDFs, it has a feature that lets you save documents in the Adobe Cloud, and it's not FedRAMP. So you really do not want to allow CUI going through that at all. And what you can do here is you can mark that as a contractor risk managed asset, because how it is currently, how are you stopping people from uploading CUI to the Adobe Creative Cloud? What you can do is set up registry keys that block that ability, and then you could be able to mark that as out of scope, right? So this is a very good way to track what's in scope, what's out of scope, and that is how I would go about it. And honestly, this list is just very good in general because, like I said, you can really get granular in terms of, okay, how am I stopping people from uploading CUI here? Is CUI going through here? If you want to mark your MSP as out of scope or not a CUI asset, you're gonna have to justify that to an assessor, right? In the very early stages of the pre-assessment where you guys are agreeing on your scope. If your MSP says there's no CUI going through it, how are you ensuring that? You got to be prepared on how you're going to prove that. Do they have an agreement that says, hey, we don't touch CUI? That's going to be pretty tough to prove, in my opinion, because most MSPs, their IT guys have global admin privileges over the OSC's tenant. So I don't think an agreement is going to be good unless you have an agreement and then you got like alerts set up for if an MSP technician accesses CUI. But it's really good. This list would help you a lot with Control 3.1.20. And again, you're going to have a list of approvers here. Who's approving it? When was it approved? Who was it last reviewed by? Last review date. You could even add another. I would actually add this other column here. I would add another column here about the next review date. And I don't know. It's up to you guys on how often you would check this. But at minimum, I would say annually. I would say we check this again in January. And then whoever reviews it updates this again. That way you have a track record of who's checking stuff, and then SharePoint is also versioning this. They've got a version history of this, and you can go back and see, okay, who made this change and all that. So that is why I would do it in a SharePoint list. And yeah, so if you have any questions about 3.1.20, I hope this kind of cleared things up, and I will be making more videos about other controls surrounding CMMC.